Alright guys, so this is a short, sweet, down and dirty video to kind of explain how you can use f-stop to get a crisper image, and it'll also help you understand that exposure triangle better. And we're going to do that by telling you it's not a triangle anymore. So we're going to start out with the full exposure setup here. So think of this camera as layers in a circle, right? So the thing that's closest to you is your sensor. Your sensor's sensitivity to light is controlled by the ISO. In a situation like this, you should probably always keep it down low. This particular camera that you're watching on, the ISO is set to 100. My advice, put it at 100, leave it there as much as humanly possible. The higher you take your ISO, the grainier your image is gonna be, and it's just gonna ultimately turn out not good. So if you're in any kind of daylight situation, you should be able to stay at ISO 100. There are always caveats. We'll talk about that later. The next thing between you and your subject, it goes you, sensor, shutter. Even if it's a mirrorless camera, it's still using a shutter, right? Not a physical shutter, but you get the idea. So the shutter speed controls how bright and how dark your image is, but it does it differently. It controls it by how fast that shutter goes up and lets light in. So if you are moving really fast, kind of like this, you'll see that you can kind of keep track of my hand. This camera that I'm shooting on is set at 125. It's a relative, it's about a middle of the road shutter speed. But if I turn the shutter speed down, you'll see a lot of motion blur, right? So think of it like this. If you want to shoot a subject that is sitting still, you would use a lower shutter speed. It'll open up slower, let more light in, and then close down. If you wanted to shoot a subject that is moving really fast and you don't want motion blur, you would use a higher shutter speed, but that makes the image darker. Now we get to f-stop, or iris, or aperture, or one of the billions of things you're gonna hear it called. And the short and the sweet of it is this. Okay, so the lower the aperture, the more light the lens lets in through the shutter and into the sensor. The smaller the aperture, the less light it lets in through the shutter and into the sensor. But an easier way to think of it is like your eye, okay? In bright light situations, your eye closes down. In darker situations, your eye dilates, right? Because it's trying to let more light in. Now, how do you get sharp images using this? Well, I'm gonna show you right now. So for this example today, I'm gonna use my daughter, Reiko. Come on in, baby. Step up here for me.
Hope I don't die again.
She took a tumble off of this last time.
Hello.
So I'm gonna snap off some pictures for you real quick, and I'm gonna show you the difference in a wide open aperture and a closed down aperture. And you'll notice the difference in not only the amount of light that comes into the image, but you'll also notice a difference in the focus. So I'm gonna do this real quick. I'm not gonna edit any of these images afterwards. I'm gonna put the raw images up on this video so you can see. So as I click, you'll see it. So we're gonna start out with, because she's not moving a lot, we're gonna start out with a shutter speed of 125, and we're gonna go with an f4.0. This is a 24-105 lens. f4.0 is as open as it gets, right? Once again, my ISO is set to 100. So baby, look at me right here. Might help if I did this. Also, in situations like this, autofocus is your friend. Don't be afraid to use it. All right, so here we go. So I took this picture, and it's really kind of bright. So if you look at it, it kind of opens up. Now remember, she's facing me, so the light is coming from this way, okay? So that's why you see the light on the side of her cheek, and it's really bright. So if she turns to face me, all right, so we're gonna shoot another image, and I'm gonna show you how f-stop works with the focus in the image. So here, I'm gonna pop off a quick shot of my daughter. There we go, we're all focused up. But you'll notice when you look at that image that the background is really blurry. The foreground, where my daughter is really sharp. Let's crank up the f-stop and let's have another look at what happens. So I'm gonna take it up one step. We're taking it up to 5.0. Ready? So you'll notice that it's a little bit more in focus, but the overall image is darker. Okay, we're gonna do it again. Take another one from a little further back so you can get a better idea of it. Yeah, same thing.
I feel like I don't know how to smile anymore.
Well, it looks like you're smiling here. So the light coming in from the window is really bright. My subject, which is my daughter, it is relatively dark, and then the background you see there in my house, that's a lot darker. So when you begin to close down the f-stop, things become more in focus. So you'll notice that the background on this one is slightly more in focus. Let me do that again, except we're gonna crank up the f-stop one more notch. Go to 6.3. Okay, so you notice that the image got a ton darker, but if we jump in and we look at it, things in the background start to become sharper. So the higher the number on your f-stop, the more stuff you get in focus. That is how f-stop on a camera controls focus and focus depth of field. Now, we're taking a darker image here, and we don't want that. I mean, maybe you do, but for this one, I don't want that.
So in f-stop, it's like a two-way route, but both of them lead to good and bad at the same time. Like, you have a darker image, but the background is sharper. But if you have a lighter image, the background is
Blurry, fuzzy. Aspiring photographer here.
Yay.
So here's what we can do. Because we're raising our f-stop, we have two options. We can either A, turn down our shutter speed, which means it's slower, but there's more chance for motion blur, right? So I'm gonna turn down my shutter speed to 115. I don't ever go this low, but I'm gonna do it just to show you. The f-stop is still at 6.3. Same picture, guys. So it lightened it up. You can see that it lightened up the image, but here's the trick.
I show my teeth.
Reiko, start shaking your head like this. What we get now, because our shutter speed is so low, is we get a blurry image. So the other compensation you can do for this, if you have to shoot at a higher f-stop to get better focus, then you can adjust the ISO, but be careful. Don't overdo it. Don't overdo it. You'll wind up with a grainy image. So I'm gonna take my ISO up just a hair. I'm gonna take my shutter speed up just a hair, but I'm gonna stay at f6.3 for my f-stop. Okay, so I'm gonna hit my ISO and I'm gonna take it up to 200, basically one step above. All right, here we go. Don't move, just stay. So now we're back to that original image where everything was light, but now there's some more focus in the background. Because I adjusted my ISO up one notch, the sensor perceived more light. The f-stop didn't change, which means we're still getting the sharpness on everything. So, sharpness is controlled in the f-stop, right? It's also controlled by the shutter speed. The shutter speed is good for fast stuff, right? So let me show you this image. So I'm gonna take this, I'm gonna take my f-stop down so that I can get more light in, but I'm gonna make her move a lot.
Haha, I love moving.
Okay, we're down to f4.0, and I'm gonna turn my shutter speed up to, let's go 125, and I want you to just take your hands and do this with them. So you can see in this image, even though she was moving her hands, we got them for the most part in focus, but the image is darker now. So it's a delicate balance between adjusting the shutter speed, the f-stop, and the ISO. General rule of thumb, let me summarize. ISO, turn it down, leave it down whenever possible. Always turn the ISO down as much as you can, whenever you can. Shutter speed. Higher shutter speed for action. Lower shutter speed for stills, portraits, things where people are posing, where stuff is happening in super slow motion. F-stop. F-stop on the lens controls sharpness. The higher the number, the more stuff is in focus on a plane like this. okay? The more stuff is in focus this way, the higher the f-stop is. The lower the f-stop, the less stuff is in focus, okay? Finally, there's a piece of equipment I want to draw your attention to. We're going to talk about a neutral density filter, or a variable neutral density filter. You'll hear it called a variable ND for short. I have one right here in my hand. So I'm going to open this thing up and I'm going to show you exactly how this works. So I set the camera on these settings for a very specific reason. I'm a video guy, I'm a lighting guy. I love to use lights and get professional with everything, but I'm backlit by this for two reasons. Number one, because we were shooting with natural light, and number two, so I could show you this particular thing. This is an ND filter. You can already see as I pull it in front, you see the color kind of changes just a hair. The tint gets a little bit different, right? But watch this. See if I can get it and adjust it here. As I adjust this, look at what it's doing to the light outside. You can see what's outside my window, right? If I pull it over here, you can see that there's cars moving. You can see my front yard. You can see my privacy fence that I have there. You can even see my plants, right? So what this does is this allows you to have a lower f-stop or a lower shutter speed or a lower ISO, and it will allow you to cut down some of the bright light. So if something is blown out, you can really set it up with this. These things are lifesavers. You can get them fixed, right? You can get them to where they're just this one setting, or you can get a variable ND, see if I can get a focus on there, that has, I don't know if I can focus on that. Nope, sure can't. I'll put something on the screen. You get a variable ND, which allows you to cycle through different densities, okay? This is a lifesaver. These can be affordable or incredibly expensive. It's totally dependent on which one you want to buy. I've seen them as high as $500. I've seen them as low as $20. So it's just completely up to you. So the next thing I'm going to show you is how to get things sharper in Photoshop, but I want to make this as crystal clear as I possibly can. Get the best image that you possibly can in camera, because there's only so much you can do in Photoshop as far as saving a fuzzy image. And if you overdo it in Photoshop, people are gonna know the difference. So always strive to use your camera to get better images in camera. Don't rely on Photoshop. Anyway, let's jump over to Photoshop and I'm gonna show you how that works.
Okay, so now we're down in my studio, and I'm going to show you a way that you can add a little bit more crispness to just about anything. Now, I wanna preface this by saying, make sure you get it right in camera. But if you got it as best as you could in camera, and I mean, you really worked on it, and you wound up with just a little bit of softness, or you wish there could be a little bit more crispness on an image, I'm gonna show you a way to add that in Photoshop, and it's called a high pass filter. Now this is gonna be real quick, down and dirty. I'm gonna show you this on an image that is not edited whatsoever. This is one I have in just, my storage. I shot this of a buddy of mine. I have done edits to this image in the past, but the one that we're actually looking at today has 0 edits on it whatsoever, okay? So let's jump in and get started. So here we are in Photoshop. I have my image here and I want to do some sharpening to it. Well, one of the first things that I need to do is I need to pop open my layers panel. So I'm going to put my layers panel right there, and I like it right here, so I'm going to drag it out a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to make a duplicate of the layer. I'm going to grab this layer and I'm going to make a duplicate of it. Always, always, always make a duplicate of your layer. Never, never, never not make a duplicate of your layer. Always do it. So we're going to zoom in, and I'm going to want to put some sharpness on his eyes. Now this picture's in focus. It looks great, but I'm a huge fan of popping the eyes. So let me jump in and show you. Okay, there are the eyes. They're sharp. I like them. They're tack sharp, but I always like to draw attention to it. So we're gonna stay in here on the face. So let me back out a little bit so you can see the whole image. Here's what you do. with your copy selected, you go over to Filter, scroll down to Other, go down to High Pass. Here's what this does. It's instantly going to pop up a dialog box and it's going to turn your image gray. If the dialog box says 0.1, you're not seeing anything here, right? But if your image is or if the dialog is cranked way this high, you're going to see this really weird distortion. You should generally stay in the lower numbers. Subtle is better. Let me say that again. Don't overdo this. If you overdo this, it's going to look like ass and your picture's just going to be screwed. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to take this guy down to about, say 3.4. Is it enough? I don't know. I'm going to pan over here, go up to his eyes. Is it enough? Okay, you see I have a little bit of detail in there. I kind of like that. It's a little much for my taste, but just to show you the point, I'm going to do it at 3.3. So I'm going to click OK. Now, I have this gray layer over my image. How does that work? Real simple. We're going to put it down to overlaying. Pretty easy, right? Not hard. I'm going to zoom back into his eyes. And I'm going to show you what this looks like with it on and with it off. With it off, it's a little soft right here. I like it a little soft. The skin is soft. It shows me more of who he is. With it on, it's a little bit overkill. I've got too much texture in the face and too much texture in between his eyes. So how do we fix this? Well, it's real simple. We're going to use a layer mask. If you select the layer that you just put the high pass on, come down here to this little icon right here. It's a square with a circle in it. Click that. If you look back up at the layer, you'll see that it put an extra white frame there. Now, this is a layer mask. This is really easy. Here's how this works. If this is white, it shows everything. If it is black, I'm going to hit Command-I or Control-I on a PC. It shows none of it. Now, a layer mask is beautiful because we can paint it on. So remember, if the layer mask is completely black, it's not showing anything from this layer, meaning this layer does not show up. But if we get our paintbrush and we turn our flow down to about 30, 35, something like that, and we select white right over here, we can actually paint in what we want. Now I'm just adjusting the brush size. You can do that here, right? You can do that here by clicking that, or you can use the bracket keys on your computer. Anyway, so I'm bringing it down and I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. I love to sharpen this whole area. So if you'll see, I've got my black selected and I'm painting with white, and you'll see, I'll do it right here on the nose to kind of illustrate the point. You'll see that it's bringing out the detail. I don't like it on the nose. I just like it on the eyes, a little bit in the eyebrows. So we only want to do this super, super subtly. Remember, this is not a fix, it is an accent. You use this to enhance the image, not to repair it. Sometimes you may have to break this out in a repair job, but please, please be subtle with this. You want your images to look crisp and beautiful in camera as much as possible. I'm gonna give him a little bit of a kick right there on his mustache. And then I always love to come up here and just pop in 1 or 2 passes on the hair. Now that's just me. Now, as you can see, I haven't made any repairs to this image whatsoever. If you guys want to see that, I'll show you how to do that. But all I did was I put a high pass filter on a layer, put a layer mask on it, turned it to black, and then started painting on with white. Turn it off, see it? Turn it back on. There it is. Boom. Little bit of sharpness in the eyes. I'm gonna back out. So now it looks like he's actually looking at you and you're focused on his eyes. If I turn it off, it's still a good image. It still looks great. But if I turn it on, we get more crispness in the eyes. Now you can use this to highlight a flower. You can use this to maybe make some weeds in the background a little sharper. You can add this effect subtly to a lot of different things in a lot of different circumstances. But remember, it's all about the f-stop in the camera for sharpness. If you are shooting a subject that is moving, it's about f-stop and shutter speed. If you are shooting a subject that is standing still or close to motionless, it's just about f-stop. Okay, I hope this answered your question, and if it didn't, or if it raised more questions, hit me up. Drop me a DM. Post it in here. It doesn't matter. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about this technique, your camera, or anything else. All right? Catch you guys later.